All right, welcome back to MINDPUMP TV. We got Dr. Jordan Shallow in the house again. This is gonna be a great video for you guys. This is definitely a little more advanced. So I just wanna let you guys know that before you guys watch this video. For sure, I know we're gonna get some people under here that are gonna think this is wrong or it's controversial, but there are reasons why he is lifting this way. So these exercises that we're going to teach you is upper back exercises. And a lot of people have weak upper backs. A lot of that's due to upper cross syndrome, not training it correctly, not being connected to it when you lift. And so there's this big fear around doing some movements with a slight rounded back. Jordan's gonna get in great detail here on why that's okay and then how to perform specific movements to strengthen that upper back, but then also stay safe while you do it. So pay close attention to this video. He's gonna show you guys 4 different movements that may seem controversial, but make sure you guys listen in detail, comment below. We'll try and get back to you guys and help you guys out. And make sure you guys subscribe, like the channel.
All right, guys, today we're gonna go over the best accessory movements for powerlifting that are gonna help build strength in the upper back. Now, a little unconventional movements I'm gonna go through, but they all sort of follow this similar principle of training the back with purposeful spinal flexion. Now, a lot of people say, don't bend your back when you're lifting, and by and large, that's a safe cue for beginners to follow. But as you kind of progress through strength, you start to realize that back is a bit of an ambiguous term. The spine can be broken up into different segments. You have your cervical, you have your thoracic, you have your lumbar, you have your sacrum. And each one of those sort of follows a different pattern. So all the movements we're gonna go through are gonna train with purposeful flexion of the thoracic spine. So the thoracic spine has an easier time of circumferentially distributing pressure because what distinguishes your thoracic spine as a thoracic vertebra within that column is actually its presence of ribs that attach onto it. So ribs are gonna help circumferentially distribute that pressure. Think of ribs like core muscles you can't turn off. It'll afford you an ability to train in a certain amount of flexion because the ribs are going to help manage a lot of that stress of that axial load. So the movements we're going to go through in order, it's just going to be a protracted flex row, a front squat, then we're going to get into good mornings, and then we're going to get into stiff leg deadlifts from a deficit. So we're going to show you what each one of those looks like and how it pertains to building strength in the upper back. All right, guys, so the first movement we're gonna go over is the protracted flex row. Now, it's just a variation, it's kind of a principle that can be applied to any row, whether it be cable or dumbbell. We're gonna use the barbell today for for sort of the sake of ease. Now, the principle here we're gonna try and focus on is we're gonna try and keep the lumbar spine in neutral while we flex the upper back when we row. So a conventional barbell row that we see is gonna be here, very extended, very minimal travel through the shoulder blades. So we think when we start to flex that upper back, we actually allow for our scapula to start to wing out and start to protract and elevate. And that's gonna help build strength, not only in the erectors from being in this flex over position, but also the rhomboids and middle traps that are gonna be stretched out further, giving them more room to travel as we retract and depress and then extend that upper back. So kind of a dual benefit to this movement because we do get to train the erectors from being in that sort of chest over the floor position and being in that flexed upper back. But with that flexed upper back, it's gonna allow our scapulas to travel further. Most people, when they do their rows, they kind of stop their scaps in neutral, don't flex their upper back. But here, we're gonna purposely flex the upper back, allow our shoulder blades to move further. Think of it this way, when we train bicep curls, we don't train elbow flexion from a partially flexed position already. So why would it, and then when we train rows, we train that retraction from a partially retracted position to start. We want to get as much joint travel as we can through that scapula, which will force us to flex the upper back, protract and elevate the scapula, so that when we're activating the lower traps and the rhomboids, we have room to travel through that joint to retract and depress. So what that's going to look like, you're going to grab the bar, shoulder width apart, deadlift it off the floor to start. As you hinge into that position, most people stop here. The big thing is control your lumbar spine with your midsection and allow your upper back to flex. Now from here, we're gonna go through a longer range of motion. So again, this is a barbell version, but a general principle that can be applied across any of your rowing movements to help build that strength in the thoracic spine, in the upper back, and also build some strength in your rhomboids and lower traps as well. All right, guys, so the second movement we're gonna go over as far as sort of accessory powerlifting movements to help build strength in the upper back is actually gonna be the front squat. So a little unconventional, but it all comes down to how you cue it. This cue is also true of that of the safety bar squat as well. I'm gonna bro rack it. You can Olympic lift it rack it if you'd like. So what you're gonna do when you unrock and you come out. The big mistake I see is a lot of people, they try and go into that extension right out of the gate. And what you're doing here is you're actually taking your back right out of the equation. So what you want to do is get that bar settled and then almost tuck the rib cage down. Now all of your strength is coming from active extension of your upper back. So these muscles that we're trying to train, these erector muscles or extensor muscles, aren't really extensors, they're rather anti-flexors. So when our spine is stacked up, they're not really working, but when our spine starts to flex, now they're sort of grabbing hold to stop any further flexion. So in the front squat, what you want to do is kind of start with that rib cage tucked down. Then as you descend into the bottom of the squat, you start to drive your elbows high from your upper back, just at that pinnacle moment when we're transferring that force from the eccentric to the concentric. So kind of start real tight in the upper back when you tuck that rib cage down, and then allow the knees to travel forward. We're gonna open up, and then when you hit the bottom, in this position, when I drive my elbows up from my upper back, I'm gonna help keep my knees over my toes and not shoot back. So if I stay flexed the entire time, I'm gonna end up here with my hips way back, and I'm gonna lose that center of gravity. But if we increase the amount of tension in the upper back as we descend, and as we hit that hole, the elbows are high coming from that upper back, then drive. So again, a little unconventional, but the cue of leg driving in your upper back is gonna be something consistent with almost every one of your power lifts, even with your bench press. When you sort of stay tight with the floor, you're thinking of creating that leg drive right into that arch from the upper back. So it's a good cue if you can kind of wrap your head around the mechanics of why you're gonna front squat like that, but a really good exercise to start drilling in that thoracic flexed position in your training. All right, so third movement we're gonna do, so start building strength in the upper back as far as powerlifting accessories go, is the good morning. Commonly like bastardized exercise when it comes to executing proper form. So you almost wanna get the bar in like your low bar position when you squat. We're gonna take a a wider than usual stance if we think of like wider than our deadlift stance. Now kind of with that bar in the upper traps, from here the whole cueing process is basically gonna be a Romanian deadlift. So we're really gonna try and shoot the hips back. But as it pertains to the upper back, as the hips go back, the upper back's gonna start to flex. So whether you're using a straight bar or a safety squat bar, you're gonna start to get some flexion. This is good, this is where we wanna be, because we're training those extensors or those erectors to act like anti-flexors as the spine flexes, or the upper back, thoracic spine flexes under load. So from here, we're gonna shoot hips back, 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 cue that RDL position, and then up and through. So really trying to like sit into the heels, we drive those hips back, allow that upper back to flex, and then come through. So a couple more. So you wanna flex the thoracic spine to the point where the lumbar spine is about to start flexing, and then you hinge up. So that's the difference between having a rounded back versus having a rounded thoracic spine. All right guys, so the last and final movement we're gonna go through for training that upper back, training that strength in thoracic flexion, is gonna be a deadlift variation from a deficit. So we're gonna do stiff legs from a deficit. Approach this one with a bit of caution. So use lighter weight, really try and feel this movement out first, because like most things, if they can be really beneficial, they can also be really detrimental if done improperly. So sort of a disclaimer there on this particular movement. What you're gonna do, I mean, you can start with a plate, 2 plates, or 2-inch box, 3-inch box, whatever you prefer. We're gonna place that sort of underneath the bar. We're gonna approach it kind of like a stiff leg deadlift, or even like a Romanian deadlift if you're more comfortable with that. Hips go way back. And now again, we're gonna try and get to the bar by flexing that upper back, keeping it flexed the entire time throughout that range of motion, so those extensors, those erectors of the thoracic spine stay under tension, under load. But two, we're gonna have to stay really rigid through the midsection. The ribs and the extensors, they're gonna stay on due to position, where if we start lacking here, we're gonna go from flexing the thoracic spine to flexing the lumbar spine, and that's where things can get a little bit dangerous. So we're gonna drive those hips way back. And now to make up that ground for the bar, we're gonna start protracting the scaps, really start to flex. So I'd think of like attaching the pinkies together through the upper back, where we're trying to stay nice and rigid in that flexed and protracted position. So we're gonna grab a hold of the bar, hips way back, back tight, and then before you break the floor, cue that midsection to stay nice and rigid. Bring the hips through. Now to descend the movement, we're gonna start driving those hips back and really allowing that flexion through the thoracic spine, and then back up. So think, dig your heels in when you break off the floor, real tight through the upper back, and hinge.